Good morning. Happy Saturday to you. This is Lou Benninger, and you're listening to Live with Lou on KMYC The Patriot, 1410 AM. I'm here with Wiki Man Santos Vigil, and we're going to be here for 3 hours today till noon. We are speaking live today, so if you want to call in, you can at 530-742-5555. That's 530-742-5555. If you're out in one of these distant places and your reception doesn't come off really well, you can go to our website at kmycradio.com, and click on Listen Live, and hopefully our live stream is working well and you can listen to it loud and clear. Or if you decide you want to listen some other time, or in the future you want to listen some other time, it's a little different rendition. They have to scrub some of the clips out of it because it goes on YouTube and they have copyright limitations. So you can go to One Eye Blind Media on YouTube, One Eye Blind Media, and go to that channel and then click on Live with Lou and listen to the show that you want, loud and clear, any time of the day or night, and you can be a happy camper, or maybe you want to re-listen to a point that we make. It's always going to be available to you. Thanks to the guy that runs that, One Eye Blind Media, is Chris Starkey. So we thank him and his work for us to help us be on the air over there. So I'm still fascinated by the State of the Union message. Did you watch the State of the Union? I was at lunch yesterday, and we were, a friend of mine, longtime friend, and we were talking about the State of the Union. It came up, the State of the Union message. And I thought, actually, I just seen clips of it, but I wrote about it, if you're interested. And since then, I've seen other articles that were similar genre as mine, talking about being shocked at the State of the Union message and shocked at the opposition party of how they couldn't find anything to come together on in that speech. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So times have changed, and you might have, if you watch the state, maybe you should go to YouTube and just watch that and watch the camera pan across the chamber and look at the people with the sourpuss looks on their faces, and just grim. It's like they were all at a funeral. And so I wrote an article in the Territorial Dispatch. You can get that at territorialdispatch.biz. And the article is Not Your Parents' Democrats. And when I was raised, one parent My dad was a Republican. My mother was a Democrat. But really, they were very conservative in their values. They were not church people, but they were very conservative. And they would have been sickened by the behavior of the Liberal Party in the United States. And I was fascinated because I've always been concerned. Actually, I shared some concerns of Democrats and Republicans about inner cities and young people not having good schools, and particularly black youth not having good employment opportunities, particularly when they drop out of school, and what to do about that. It just seems like we're at loggerheads. You just can't seem to fix it. You have unions that won't budge, and so kids just walk away. You know, we have the opportunity, we just don't attend anymore. So I'm not going to go there. It's boring, and I'm not learning anything. So to have the NAACP is always complaining about everything having to do with, it's always racism, and it's always traced back to hundreds of years ago, even though white people can't trace any problems they've had back hundreds of years, even if they were persecuted in Ireland or wherever they came from, Germany or wherever they came from. So to hear that the black unemployment rate is the lowest ever recorded in history, which is back into the 70s, is amazing. Because if you go back into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, before the war on poverty started with Lyndon Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson in the 60s, you will find blacks were working at about the same pace as whites. But it was after the welfare, quote unquote, the war on poverty and the rapid increase of welfare benefits, where the working poor quit working and remained poor but on welfare. So to hear that the black young people and blacks in general were going to work in record numbers, I thought was very exciting, no matter which president was in office. And let me just help everybody see this, because many times politicians will talk like they can actually create business or create jobs. All they can do is really screw up business and shrink the economy. They cannot benefit the economy unless they do one thing, and that is cut regulations, get out of the way, in other words. You ever been on a job, a construction project, you're trying to get something done and somebody's standing in the way talking? That's what government is. They're in the way. And they're in the way in terms of taking your income and taking a good measure of your income and wasting it. And then by regulations, which I think President Trump has shown, the egregious impact of regulations on business causes business to just shrink and to not hire people and to not expand, and in fact actually leave the country. So far in the United States, we still have the ability to get up and move to another city, move to another state. You might think, well, that's true everywhere in the world. No, it's not. You can't just move around and do whatever you want in third world countries many times, because they're communists and they'll tell you what they want you to do. So we still have the ability to move around and leave. And so many businesses have left the United States because the tax rate on corporations was one of the highest tax rates in the world. And I know the people at Yuba County always are questioning my statistics. So maybe the information officers over there can do a fact check on all this. I think we were up to 35% corporate tax rate, and that is one of the highest in the world. And now I think they reduced it to about 21%. That change caused hundreds of businesses to make changes themselves and to move factories back to the United States, move billions of dollars back to the United States. So, but when I looked at the chambers, during the State of the Union message, black quote unquote leaders, they consider themselves leaders, it seemed like the unemployment rate for blacks had tripled, not dropped to very low. Hispanic representatives were also very sad, even though the Hispanic unemployment rate, which was even lower than the blacks, it was at a historic low as well. That wasn't as talked about because blacks are usually the one they're the ones that advocate for all the handouts. So I found booing things that normally would be considered patriotic, things like the flag, the national anthem, standing for the national anthem, being respectful for our police and military. All these things were hateful. When people started in the chambers chanting USA, some of the open borders people that don't want to have any borders at all, just let people come and go as they please, participate, pay taxes as they please, they left the auditorium. Isn't that interesting? They had less grace than a high school student would sitting in class. There was no support for extra effort and money for the opioid epidemic. Pro-life, no support for that. It's interesting, the mockery, and I'm so fascinated because $1,000, like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 bonuses given to employees. Now we're up to millions of employees in the United States getting these kinds of bonuses. The Democrats, they would fight to the death for raise the minimum wage, but they don't see any benefit in businesses thriving and giving increases in wages themselves. They're always happy when they force business to pay something when they don't want to pay something. Like they are the authors of righteousness, these Democrats. So when all these businesses, and they're continuing right up to today, I can't remember what business recently, was it Chipotle or one of those that just announced they were giving raises or bonuses. But there was no happiness on behalf of Democrats they called them crumbs, they mocked them, and so on and on it goes. And then finally, what capped it off after this State of the Union message, then they had to vote on trying to stop aborting children after the 20th week in the womb. And the Democrats did their best and shut that down. In other words, you can just abort right up to any time you want, even partial birth abortions. So, what an amazing. I just thought there was some common ground in between Democrats and Republicans, but I know that after 8 years of Obama, they want a country that doesn't look anything like the America that we have been used to, patriotic, freedom-loving, small government, freedom, a lot of freedom. They don't want that. And so that was loud and clear. I got it. I got that. So the latest thing, a couple latest things, I'm going to talk about the Olympics, but also President Trump had mentioned the idea of maybe having a parade. And I don't know, did you notice that the Democrats the liberal media just had a total fit, as if he was a Stalin or Mao Zedong, as if there's never been a parade. I got to thinking about military parades, and I thought, well, heck, we got one we do here at Marysville, right? The Veterans Parade. It's one of the most well-attended parades I think we have, and it's a real source of pride, and it's I know some of my friends who have young children like to take them down and begin to teach them respect for those who are serving among us, whether it's law enforcement or the military and protecting us. But when Trump begins to mention about honoring the military, in fact, do you remember, I was just thinking about this morning, where Obama, you remember he fired like about 200 or more military leaders. He just fired them. Remember that? And then replaced them with other people he thought were, actually, he replaced them with what I call sissy leaders that were politically correct. In fact, I just saw where a guy that either retired or quit the FBI gave his input on years of service with the FBI, and he said when he went to work with the FBI, he was informed by other conservative FBI agents that if he wanted to get promoted, he had to answer all the questions like a liberal would. Because all these agencies under Obama, the FBI, the EPA, the IRS, all of these agencies, they had implanted leaders that were liberals. And if you wanted to promote or go up the ladder, you had to think like they thought, politically correct thoughts. And you had to be a liberal in your mindset and the way you expressed yourself. So if you wanted to get promoted, that's what you had to do. If you just want to keep your mouth shut and do your job, then you could maybe be your conservative self. So there was a certain words and phrases that you could and couldn't use if you wanted to go someplace. So to have President Trump be pro-military and pro-police, the media simply hates him for it. So I was watching where Secretary of Defense Mattis was being asked questions on the weekly news conference, and they were saying they just wanted to catch him regarding this parade thing. And his concept was, he said, hey, it's no secret that the President of the United States likes the military. Now, that's a shocking thing nowadays. Did you know? You can just feel it when you're seeing those media, the press conferences with the media. You can sense the animosity and the vitriol and the bitterness and the mockery. You can just sense it in the spirit. I don't know whether you can. I certainly can. I can just watch it and sense the mockery in the spirit of the place towards the military and law enforcement, and they just make these workers that are working for Trump, they just make them confess that Trump is indeed for the military, as if they want to catch him seeming like it's hard to actually like the military. But Trump being cast as Hitler is the newest thing in the media. But the fact is, there's always this hypocrisy in the media and in the left. And for instance, in 1995, Trump, the New York City traditionally had what they call the Nation's Parade, where, according to an article in the United Press International, UPI, back then, the crowd cheered, quote, as 25,000 veterans marched in New York City, marking the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. That was in 1995. But the parade was in jeopardy because there was no funding for it. So a guy named, a real estate developer named Donald Trump in 1995 contributed $200,000 towards the parade, and then went out and raised $300,000 more for $500,000 total from his friends so New York City could celebrate the 50th anniversary of the ending of World War II. Isn't that cool? So it isn't like Donald Trump now has just become a different man. It's just the same guy he always was. He's just now president. And it's interesting that Chuck Schumer was, and these people, they forget about all that. So also in Chattanooga, Tennessee, they have one of the longest running Armed Forces Day parades in the nation. I mean, there's all kinds of Armed Forces parades, but now all of a sudden to have a parade that Trump wants to have, that's evil. And that's the way it's being cast. In 2014, are we out of time? We got a minute. Okay, we got a minute here. So I just want to make a couple more comments here about this parade. In 2014, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called on the Department of Defense to support a huge military parade in New York City. And somehow CNN overlooked that. But now, with Trump saying it, it's now evil. So we had a California school teacher. This is amazing, these California teachers. Ridicule a student for wearing a shirt with a Marine emblem. And then the teacher went on a rant insisting that military personnel are dumb SHITSs. They're not high-level thinkers, she said. They're not academic people. They're not intelligent people. They're freaking lowest of the low, the teacher said. So when Trump Chief of Staff John Kelly was asked about the remarks, he fittingly replied, it's a guy that said these things. The guy ought to go to hell, he said. I hope he enjoys the liberties we have fought for, but he can go to hell. We'll be right back, and we got 2.5 more hours to talk about things. Still on. Okay. Well, sorry. We're having computer problems out here this morning, and we've been having them, but we report it, and no one does anything. So we'll have to reboot, but I have other stuff to talk about for the next 3 hours, so we'll just skip the break until we can start up again. All right? So anyway, back to John Kelly. So we have this... we have this desire for this parade. And so David French, a writer for the National Review and an Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran, made this comment. He said, in more than 16 years since 9/11, these are some of the accomplishments of the people in the military. Number one, we toppled the Taliban. Number two, we toppled Saddam Hussein. Number three, we defeated a group in the what they call the AQI insurgency. We defeated the ISIS caliphate in Iraq and Syria. We endured years of grinding deployments while fighting with honor. And David French said, I'm fine with the parade, because some military people said, we don't want to do any parade, right? So French says in the National Review, he said, if anyone's earned it, it's our brave armed forces patriots. So I just want to do a little comparison here. This whole issue of the military and the flag and the anthem got all out of control with the NFL, right? This whole year's been a fiasco, right? With starting with Colin Kaepernick the previous year kneeling, right? And so the NFL says, well, we're private enterprise and you're taking shots at private enterprise, but the NFL really isn't a private enterprise. And so they said we have a right to, these people have a right to express what they want to express. And so the general public spoke to that, and the Attendance at games fell off maybe by 40, 50%. Viewership was down hundreds of millions of looks throughout the year. And they lost millions and millions of dollars because people don't agree with that. I think people would rather have a parade. The question is would you rather have a parade or the NFL? I would much rather have a military parade than watch an NFL game nowadays. Because it's like NFL doesn't make any difference to how your life is going to go. I want you to think about every time I get up in the morning and it's nice and quiet in my neighborhood, I'm having a good day, nobody's kicking on my door, there's no planes dropping stuff on me. I'm thinking, hey, thank God for the American military and law enforcement taking care of the business and keeping a lid on this sucker. So, Michelle Malkin wrote a great article about what a ripoff the NFL is and how, when people say, oh, all the money you're wasting. Have you, honestly, whenever you look at anywhere in government, whether you look in our city, in Marysville, Yuba City, the county, the state, the federal, it's just massive, sickening, ridiculous waste. And then when you talk about, somebody says, oh, we want to have a parade. Oh, my God, it's going to cost millions of dollars. What a waste. Why doesn't he feed the poor? Why didn't he do this? Well, I want to just let you know how much these sports teams are costing you. You think, oh, well, I don't go to the games. They're really not costing me anything. Well, whether you think, do you know in Marysville we have a baseball stadium? Are you back up? Okay. So what do you want to do? You want me to just keep talking till 10? Just keep going? Okay. So anyway, I want you to think about the baseball stadium right here on 14th and B. How do you think that baseball stadium got there? Do you know that baseball team is a private enterprise, right? But our tax dollars in Marysville, we're broke, but we have a negative cash flow. We're supporting that stadium over there. Did you know that? Your tax dollars. Would you rather have better streets or a baseball stadium? Well, that question comes up over and over again, whether you go down to Sacramento at Arco Arena and Raleigh Stadium, where the River Cats play. And so Michelle Malkin says, I'm calling foul on all the leftists rushing to protect the NFL's protest crusaders from President Trump's criticism. The NFL is a private enterprise whose rights are being violated by those who dare to challenge the league's political radicalization. That's what the NFL would say. That's the defense, that they're a private enterprise and their rights are being trampled. And so it's interesting when you look at people like Boston Mayor Tom Menino or Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Do you remember when they attacked Chick-fil-A, a private fast food operation? And you know the reason they attacked them? It was because of their spiritual beliefs. And they didn't like them, and they wanted to run them out of their cities. Isn't that interesting? So when this protection of free enterprise is kind of selective, isn't it? So is the NFL really a private enterprise? So back in 1999, Michelle Malkin started a thing called Pork Watch, Waste Watch, Pork Watch. And she says since then, taxpayers at all levels of government have foot the bill for football stadiums to the tune of an estimated $1 billion, not altogether, a year since 1999. So we're almost, 20 years down the road, right? We're almost at 2019. That's 2019 will be 20 years, $1 billion a year that taxpayers, not by buying tickets and hot dogs and paying parking fees to park there. But out of their taxes, out of the budgets of governments and credits and benefits, we've been substituting the NFL. So you think, oh, well, we don't want to pay to honor the military. Well, yeah. Well, look at what we're doing for the NFL. People that are spitting in the face of the military and the police. It says over the past decade, the new tax-supported NFL stadiums, here's some of them. Indianapolis Colts, $720 million. Dallas Cowboys, $1.15 million. New York Jets and Giants, $1.6 billion. Sorry, both those, there's $720 million, $1.15 billion for Cowboys. Jets and Giants, $1.6 billion. Vikings, $1.1 billion. Falcons, $1.5 billion. And San Francisco 49ers, $1.3 billion. And then the Los Angeles Chargers, San Diego Chargers moved to L.A., and joining the Rams down there for a $1.9 billion stadium, or $2.6 billion, and then $1.9 billion, now the Raiders are going to Las Vegas. Now, it's interesting, the Raiders have been in Oakland for all these years, right? And 20 years ago, there was a big renovation on the Alameda County Coliseum for the Raiders. And we still have an $83 million taxpayer-supported debt on that stadium, and the Raiders are leaving. And the Oakland Athletics are already talking about wanting to have a new stadium. And who do you think's paying for that? That would be taxpayers. So when you think, oh, we're not going to support our military with the parade and honor the military and protecting us and giving their lives for us, no, but we'll pay for stadiums for billionaires who own teams to hire millionaires. You think, oh, this is a lie. I got a kick out of it. The Yuba City Council at one time. In fact, I remember John Duke was on the city council, and he made a big deal. Hey, we need to keep the Kings. Remember the Kings were going to Seattle? And so John Duke said, all these businesses, we need to chip in and to convince the Kings to stay because they are an economic boon to the region. They're not an economic boon to the region. When you start to read articles or analysis by sports economists that are in look at the sports industry, they conclude repeatedly that the effects of stadium subsidies on employment and economic activity are negligible or even negative. So they think, that sports stadium, the new Kings Arena in downtown, there's all kinds of business. So what? The question is whether it overall is a negative or positive effect. It isn't whether you like it or not. It's whether it actually pencils out. So Scott Wola of the St. Louis Federal Reserve reported earlier last year that in 2017 poll, 83% of the economists surveyed agreed that providing state and local subsidies to build stadiums for professional sports teams is likely to cost the relevant taxpayers more than any local benefits that are generated. Yet the NFL cashes in. The very people that are spitting in the eye of military and police are getting our tax dollars. Did you know that for 73 years, up until a couple of years ago, the head office of the NFL was a nonprofit? They paid no taxes. The teams paid taxes, but so Roger Goodell and his operation didn't pay any taxes until a couple of years ago, and they changed that. Just interesting side notes of how these things work. So when you hear about Trump talking about honoring the military and the bitter hate towards Trump, that bitter hate is bigger than Trump. It's towards all you conservatives out there that think the military is something that we ought to honor and be thankful for, and tell people we're appreciative of them. And this is just one way to do that if you wanted to do it. So honestly, people, if you paid attention, in fact, Tom Coburn, I always want to call him Tom Osborne. Tom Coburn, who retired as a senator, had the Waste Book. And that was taken over by Jeff Flake, the senator from Arizona. I think Coburn was Oklahoma. And Flake now has also something like the Waste Book. If you would take time to read 100, 200 pages of just stupid, ridiculous, absurd expending of your tax dollars, it would put into perspective some of the crazy things that are being spent, your money being spent on, compared to a parade that would honor the military. So just what this is just more of that State of the Union message, chamber misbehavior. Let's see, since we got a few minutes here before 10, let me just jump into the Winter Olympics. Have you watched any of the Winter Olympics? Not anything. I almost missed the Winter Olympics. I used to get pretty excited about the Olympics, but this kind of just snuck up on me. And with all this talk of war with North Korea, I thought maybe they weren't going to have these Olympics. But Fox News, has really gone down the tubes. We used to think of Fox News as a pretty conservative channel, but the executive vice president, John Moody of Fox News, is now in trouble, and I don't know whether he'll keep his job. But he wrote a column that now I couldn't find it online. I tried to click on it. I looked at references to it. They've scrubbed it offline. He wrote a column about the Olympics, and there are some quotes in other columns now describing why he got in trouble. So he wrote an article. I guess there's the theme of the Olympics, although the motto of the Olympics was faster, higher, stronger. He says that these Olympics instead are called darker, gayer, and different. And the reason is they're, how they focus on these, they tell the story behind the Olympians. So I guess there's, now it isn't like who runs fastest or is the strongest, skis the fastest, does whatever. Now it's like who they have sex with. And so if it's like somehow if a guy kisses another guy and he's really fast or he's good at something, then I don't know, maybe it's guy-to-guy sex that actually caused him to have the wonderful life he did and have the DNA did and become so wonderful and amazing, right? And so they showed these guys kissing, I guess, at the Olympics, and it's a big breakthrough. Like, we got to have a gold medal for guys kissing guys. I don't know whether if we pulled in a small donkey and said, well, this is a person who is a down slalom skier and he screws a donkey. They said, hey, we're going to give him a double gold there because he's like special because he can screw a donkey and still ski. So Moody says that to be darker, gayer, and different isn't a good way to win medals. I thought that his point was, I thought we were there to compete and be the best. And he said, unfortunately, instead of worrying about actual athletic abilities of our Olympic teams, it appears that the U.S. Olympic Committee is more worried about the diversity of our athletes. So an official was quoted this week expressing pride, that's always a dangerous word nowadays, about making the most, by the way, in parades, I was just back to parades in Trump. I want you to think of all the different types of parades there now. Did you know our San Francisco Gay Pride Parade where they screw each other when they walk down the street and stuff? They do weird stuff, right? And we spend all kinds of money on that. Or I think the Philadelphia Eagles destroyed Philadelphia on their parade. How much that costs? Anyway, back to the Olympics. So the Olympic official said this is the most diverse U.S. squad ever to be in a Winter Olympics. I thought, what are we doing? They're taking a poll now like, well, who are you having sex with, right? Are you into bestiality? Do you have sex with children? What do you, this is the most diverse group. So they made a laundry list kind of how many, like the guy was proud, says we got this many black people, Asians, homosexuals, transsexuals. So the guy says no sport that we are aware of awarded points or medals for skin color or sexual orientation. In other words, do we get, like, if you're a speed skater, do you get an extra point if you're having sex with a person of the same gender at night? So Moody, who wrote this article, he questioned, I wonder if diversity figured into how these people were picked in the first place to compete, because you got to be picked, you got to qualify for the Olympics. So is it just about your skill now, or is it like affirmative action, like when we got Barack Obama, affirmative action president, because he was black, at least he was half black. At least the part I saw was black. I could never see him under his clothes. So Moody asked, were our Olympians selected because they're the best at what they do, or because they're the best publicity for our current obsession with having one each from column A, B, and C? This guy really got himself in trouble. So Moody went on to praise American athletes that we would all recognize, like Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier with the Major League Baseball, or Jeremy Lin. He talked about being one of the few Asians that came into NBA, the National Basketball Association. So Moody went on to point out that political correctness does not an athlete make. He insists that sports bow to political correctness by assigning teams quota for race, religion, or sexuality is like saying that professional basketball goals will be worth 4 points if achieved by a minority in that sport. For instance, if a white guy can shoot, like 81%, I think, of NBA players are black. So maybe if a white guy shoots from beyond the three-point line, he should get 4 points, right? Or if he's having sex with a donkey, he should get a 4 point. That could be because he's special. So maybe white guys, because they can't jump as good as black guys, they should get an extra point on a dunk, right? Because they can't get up. It's harder for them. They have a disability. You know, the old thing, white guys can't jump. I couldn't. So Moody agrees that we should not deny people their due because of their race or sexual proclivities, but we also shouldn't reward them for those same things. So he says at the Olympic level, not everybody is a winner. Not everyone gets a little plastic trophy to take home, he says. He concludes by saying, sorry, faster, higher, stronger still works better than we win because we're different. So for that, the lesbian, straight, gay people all came up and said their feelings were really hurt, and that guy needs to be punished. So Fox News removed the article. In fact, there was a link on one article I saw to it, and I clicked on it because I wanted to read the original article. It said, no longer, it just vanished from existence. Just like burning books. We just burned that article. We burned that article right off the internet, right out of existence. We just purged it. We have a purging. We think, some of you young people that never followed communism when it was ripping in Europe, in the Soviet Union, and in Asia, and they had book burnings when they picked up all the books and brought them into the town square and just torched everything that they didn't like, or was no free thinking. So that's what you're being introduced to, no free thinking in America. If you don't think right, we will come after you. Well, I got a call because I wrote an article in the Territorial Dispatch about the fiasco that's happening in the Yuba City Unified School System. And that fiasco is their inability to protect children from teachers. And the fact that even though there are laws, mandated or mandatory report laws on rumors or suggestions or witnessing of abuse, sexual abuse, bullying, physical abuse by adults to kids, there's all kinds of laws. And if you look it up on the internet, you'll see all the mandated reporters in our society today, of which one of them are school employees. And there's all kinds of them in society. It's amazing. So I had written an article on the front page of the Territorial Dispatch. If you want to read it, you can. Territorialdispatch.biz, B-I-Z, front page. This past, you just click on current issue. And so I got a call from a retired teacher and school administrator who heard the talk I gave last week on this radio show. And he said, Lou, go ahead and find the codes on and download on that mandatory reporting, because he says you do not have to see it to report it. A rumor you're supposed to report. Or if you see something you think is abuse, like if you notice a bruise on a child's back or leg, even though it might have been he just fell down, you report it. Or if a child says something about something happened, you didn't see it, you got to report it. It's mandatory. You don't, like the teacher at Yuba City High School said, well, I didn't see what that girl said, Jim Whitaker, the principal or the teacher coach over there. I didn't see that, so I'm not going to report it. That guy violated the law. And that law is punishable by, has punishments of up to 6 months in jail and up to $1,000 fine that's a misdemeanor. Now, the other thing is this retired principal called me over this week, and he says, Lou, you can lose your teaching credential over this. Now, that got my attention because I tried to look it up, but I didn't know exactly where to look on the teaching credential aspect of it, but there was plenty to say about penalties, financial, and to get locked up. Now, what's been going on in Yuba City is they haven't been doing anything about girls that have been touched improperly. So far, we don't know anybody having full-on sex with them. At least I don't know. But girls that have talked to me, or ladies now, they're grown ladies, that have talked to me about being touched, fondled, etc., photographed, videoed, inappropriate videoing. There's been no resolve to this. In some cases, no reporting. So I noticed this week 2 Texas principals were arrested for failing to report sexual abuse allegations. They didn't see it happen. So this is in elementary school. This is kind of interesting. These are elementary kids. And the police arrested both of them. They didn't get in trouble with the district. They were arrested and booked. Cindy Underwood, 35, principal of Kate Haynes Northwest Academy, was booked into Wichita County Jail on Monday and released soon after. Corey Dorman, 45, the principal of Crockett Elementary, was arrested last week as well. It's 2 separate incidents. Both educators were charged with failure to report separate and unrelated incidents of sexual abuse concerning students in their care. I don't think that the 1,700 plus students at Yuba City High School are being cared for. I think the ones that are being cared for are the teachers and the administrators. And I think the kids are just a meal ticket for these people to get big salaries and big pensions, and to hell with the kids. So the Wichita Falls Times Record News reported that Underwood were arrested for failing to tell police a school iPad was used by three 16-year-old boys to take photos as they engaged in various sexual acts in a classroom. These are 6-year-old kids. I wonder where they got that from. Are we out of time? We're actually going to see if we can do this now. You think it's going to work? All right. This is the Patriot. We've got live stream. Our toilet's working. And we've got redneck rain gauges. We were talking about sexual abuse on school campuses. And the fact that even though there are laws, people just choose to ignore them. What people are those? Not the perpetrators. They're ignoring them. But the people in charge, law enforcement. Oh, we don't want to arrest him. That's old Bob. We know Bob. He's a nice guy. We coach soccer together. We don't want to arrest Bob. Yeah, he should have reported it, but, you know, he forgot the rules. He must not have taken that in-service on how to report child abuse. I'm always fascinated by how supposedly the most bright people in our community on high school and elementary school campuses, people that have master's degrees, very, very intelligent people, can't get things straight. They just can't follow the basic rules. Freedom rules. Kids can bring their Bible to school. They can talk about Jesus if they want. They can wear a shirt with a logo on it as long as other kids can wear shirts with logos on them, right? They could have an NRA shirt, or I Love Jesus shirt, or I'm pro-life shirt. But it's just like people just bring the government employees bring their political agendas to the school. So they just say, oh, well, I'll take care of that child abuse. And so one lady who reported it in 1998 that Jim Whittaker touched her breasts, the report said, we checked into it, confirmed it, and took the appropriate action. Would that satisfy you as a parent? Wouldn't satisfy me. What question would you have? Well, what appropriate action would that be? We're still waiting for that. This is 1998. This is 20 years later. And there's still can't figure out what that appropriate action was. So we were talking before the break about these two Texas elementary school principals, different schools, different incidents, that both were actually arrested by law enforcement. Now, we can't even get law enforcement in our community to take a full report on some of these cases. They take an information report, which then isn't even public, a public information piece. You can't even get a copy of it. So the one situation here with two 6-year-old boys, they took photographs of them doing something sexual in the bathroom, and it wasn't properly reported, and so they arrested the principal. The second one was, according to the arrest warrant, Principal Miss Dorman was notified by 3 grandparents in mid-December that their 7-year-old grandson was sexually assaulted by a fellow 6-year-old student while in the bathroom at Crockett Elementary. The principal said she delegated the responsibility of investigating the allegations to the school counselor. She did not report the allegations to law enforcement and was unaware that anyone had reported the incident after they returned from the holidays about 20 days later. Both principals were put on administrative leave by Wichita Falls School District. To figure out what's going to happen to them. So you always have these official declarations after these incidents. So the superintendent says, in light of these recent allegations, please know that WFISD, which is their school district, will be reviewing its protocol and training for reporting suspected abuse. How many times have you heard that? We got these laws on the books. We do in-service training. These are teachers. They're taught about these things, how to run a class, bullying, all this stuff. Then they just don't do their jobs. Principals just don't do their jobs. But then there's these assurances to the public. Oh, well, we're going to review our protocols. We're going to review our training. Well, obviously, we know old Jim. He's just a great guy. Everybody loves him. It's interesting to me on the Yuba City High School campus as you talk to teachers that say, well, we knew this all the time. Oh, really? You knew it all the time. You knew he was a perv. You thought he was a creep. And you never reported it? Because you didn't see it? You ever read the code? It's right on. You can just Google it. Do teachers know how to Google it? A lady on the Yuba City Voices Facebook site, Heidi Smith, wrote this. I'm sitting here right now. I'm just livid. As a parent, I want my children to feel that they are safe at school. That if something happens to them, they can call a teacher or tell a teacher that will protect my child. There have been multiple women and girls that have come forward both recently over the past 20 years, saying they have been treated improperly by one man. Several teachers that work with this man, including 2 that are in his department and would be the ones the girls go to if something was to happen, are publicly supporting him. My question for you is this. Who are these girls supposed to go to? Where are they supposed to turn? Who is their safe person if the people they're supposed to be able to trust turn a blind eye to all the women and girls and what they're trying to say? How am I as a parent supposed to feel safe sending my children to school when it's clear that friendship is more important than student safety? I think that kind of narrows it and nails it right there. Narrows it down, nails it. We are mandated by the state of California to send our kids to school unless you decide to homeschool them, and that's considered sending your kids to school. But most people cannot homeschool because they have to be away and work, and they just can't put the time in to do the homeschooling, even though they would like to. So they send their kids to school and trust their kids to adult, highly educated people. In fact, they take pride in it that they're so much more smarter than the parents whose kids they teach. And they know best. I know what I'm talking about because I was on a school board and I heard administrators talk this way. That they know better what's best for the kids than their parents do. I disagree. And so we have these people with bachelors and masters and some doctorates. And yet we can't even protect. And then we have all these school board trustees who are educators sometimes, former educators, business people, probation officers, all kinds of highly accomplished people in the community. And they just brush this stuff right under the rug. It would be interesting if you could have all the teachers at Yuba City Unified and the trustees over the last 20 years take lie detector tests and ask them this question. Had you ever heard about Jim Whitaker, his antics, sexual antics? And see how they registered on a polygraph test. I bet that you would have 75 to 80% that would either show that they're lying or that they had heard rumors about Jim Whittaker improper behavior. And they did nothing about it. Or they actually said something, and the person they reported it to, in this case the principal, did nothing about it. Or they reported to the resource officer, who took an information-only report instead of a full investigation, and nothing was done about it. The reason I say nothing was done is the person is still employed up till recently at the Yuba City High School campus. To me, the issue isn't Jim Whittaker. He is just one person, possibly others, that could be perpetrators that have brought to light people just ignoring the law and putting 1,800 kids at risk. To me, a lot of people on the Yuba City High School campus should be held accountable for not properly reporting. It says that it's a state law. And my administrator, school administrator friend, who I think was a top-notch administrator from the sound of it, not in a local program, but a program in California, he said people can lose their teaching credential. So this coming Tuesday at 6 o'clock at night, there's going to be a hearing or a board meeting at the school district chambers on Pelora off of Bridge Street in Yuba City. If you're interested, if you're a student or a parent of a student at Yuba City High School, at what point are you going to get concerned? At what point are you just going to like, oh, I think it'll all work out, my kid's going to be good to go? I think if your kid is a female, you should be there. You should be there. It's interesting. There's been reports even against impropriety with the Yuba City High School basketball coach. Improper behavior. Not sexual, but abusive behavior. Nothing's done. Still there. I know something about this. I mean, I played sports all the way through high school. 4 years. Coach after coach after coach. I never heard of such antics of people cussing each other out and kicking people and being abusive and grabbing people. It's ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. Teachers grabbing, putting their hands on female students. Unbelievable. Touching their breasts, grabbing their butt. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm just going to blow that off? Give them say, slap on the hand, don't do that next time? Quit. It's amazing. You know, I'm old, so we didn't have opportunity to video up girls' rear ends and stuff, bending over, whatever happened there. It's too bad we got all these devices. It's just too bad. It just gives people, weird people, opportunity to do weird stuff. Just more devices, more techniques. We'll see whether Yuba City Unified is going to do the right thing. And then the issue is going to be, will the union, if Jim Whittaker is dismissed from his teaching job at Yuba City, we'll see what California is going to do on credentialing. And then we'll see how much do unions really care about your kids? I'll tell you, they care nothing about your kids. The teachers union cares nothing. Zero about your kids. Your kids can go to hell. That teachers union cares about teachers getting more money, less work, less time, more protection, protect bad teachers, Keep bad teachers employed, even if they got to put them in a rubber room or move them from school to school to school. That's what the unions are all about. They're the curse on the education of our kids in California. You wonder why we have the crappiest schools in the nation? You can lay it right at the altar of the unions. Your kids are being sacrificed on the altar of the unions. The Board of Trustees, those would be what we call puppets. The unions drive these schools. That's the bottom line. So 6 o'clock, there was supposed to be a list of charges produced, official list of charges produced. What the next step will be, that will be up to the trustees. They'll go into closed session for part of the time, but people will have a chance to make some comments for or against Mr. Whitaker. And so if you want to take part, if you have kids in the school, you might think about that, of taking part in this very important meeting, because it isn't really just about him. He's only involved in this because he did something, or he didn't do it. We'll see, right? We'll see. The issue here is, how well are your kids being protected on the Yuba City Unified School District campuses? It seems like down in Texas, 6- and 7-year-olds are having problems with foolish behavior. Where do kids learn that? I don't know. I'll just let you think about that for a second. Well, we're wrapping up this second, or this little, where are we? At the halfway point? I've lost track. We got so goofed up. We got a few minutes. I want to mention, before we go to a break here, about the Tea Party that supports the Sutter Buttes Patriots Tea Party that supports us out here. And their next meeting, they meet the first and third Monday night of the month. And their next meeting is on the 19th of February, Monday, 6:30 to 8:30. And John Cox, who is a businessman, is running for governor of California. You hear mostly about, because we just really have we don't have opposition parties running against each other anymore. The top two vote getters go to the general election from the primary. So John Cox is actually conservative and not a politician. He's a businessman. And he's going to be there at the meeting to speak. So he's a CPA and a successful businessman, built his own business from scratch, and now is very successful. So if you want to hear him, you could go check it out. 6:30 to 8:30. The doors open at 6 on the 19th of February, Monday night. It's at the Church of Glad Tidings, Building 200. They allow the Tea Party to meet there, the Church of Glad Tidings, at 1179 Eager Road, Yuba City. It's just north of the city, out on 99. You can go 99 to Eager or Live Oak Boulevard to Eager, and it's right there. And so drive in the driveway, find a parking spot. Building 200 is the first building on the left, and go check it out. So John Cox, he was supposed to be up here for a luncheon here recently and got a bad case of this flu and had to cancel that here a couple of weeks ago. He was supposed to be out at Peachtree Golf and Country Club. Couldn't make it. So this would be your second chance to see him, and hopefully he'll be healthy and be able to make that. So check it out. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to join. You can just hang out. You can just come and dip in. They're probably going to be, over the next couple of months, going to be having some candidate forums of various types. So this would be a good place to go see folks that you might want to get to know if you're going to vote for them, or not vote for them, or for them. So, okay, John Cox, Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots, February 19th. Where are we time-wise now? We got a couple of minutes? 1 minute. So we're about halfway through the show. It threw me off here because we missed one break. So we're back in business. The computer's running, the water's running, the rain gauge is working, and we're happening. The live stream is on. So we'll be right back, and we'll finish up with another half a show. We're moving on up to noon if you just showed up here. All right, welcome back. You're listening to Live with Lou, and this is the Patriot, KMYC 1410 AM. And I just wanted to give a shout-out to Monty Hecker and Elite Universal Security. You may have a business or a farm. I know there's all kinds of farmers getting ripped off, people stealing their copper off their pumps, electrical connections, and stealing all kinds of fuel and parts off their rigs, stealing actual whole pieces of equipment off farms. It's ridiculous. Or stealing walnuts. Amazing. Entire loads of walnuts. And so Elite Universal Security, or I call them Elite Security for short, they're located in Yuba County, but they serve Yuba County, and they're also up in Butte County and up in Redding, Sutter County, Yuba County. If you need security, or if your business is being harassed and your customers are being harassed coming into your business by panhandlers and such, you can call them at 749-0280, and they'll have somebody over there patrolling. They work over in my neighborhood. I see them, and they do good work. Monty's a great guy. And the other thing is I see them advertising. They're wanting workers. They're ready to hire some people. People are expanding. I don't know if you've noticed this. There's all kinds of people getting jobs. All my friends are getting jobs. So you can go to EliteUniversalSecurity.com and check it out, their jobs, what kind of work they have, different types of employment, tasks that they need done. EliteUniversalSecurity.com at 749-0280. And they also have a school where they'll train you to work for them. Or they'll train you to get a concealed weapon license, or how to handle pepper spray, or how to handle a taser. Or you could do some of the classes there that you'd normally take to get into law enforcement. I met a guy the other day that just went to work for the jail at Yuba County and never even went through the post academy. They just hired that guy on. He's had some experience. He was a sharp guy, and they hired him. They're going to put him through training as he goes along. But API Academy, API-academy.com, that's their schooling branch or arm, and you can see what kind of classes are coming up, sign up for it, and get it on. And you could probably get into some classes there before you could get into them out at the Post Academy. Take advantage of them. So check it out. Elite Universal Security and API Academy, 749-0280. So we have a caller from Kelly Ridge. That's up around the Oroville area, Lake Oroville. And Ed, are you there?
Sure am, Lou. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Good to hear from you.
Well, yeah, you bet. Good yakking at you. I just wanted to give you some kudos for your good work in the Territorial Dispatch on a regular basis, and in particular, covering the Bundy trial not long back. That was a well put together, concise report, and I just appreciate you mentioning Range Magazine as much as you do.
Okay.
And we can't forget the Hammonds who are still down there doing hard time in the Fed prison in Southern California, from up there at Malheur, that were run off their
property.
Put in jail for that alleged domestic terrorism because they set a backfire to save their ranch headquarters. But anyway, Lou, hang in there, and maybe you could get together with CJ sometime there at Ranger Magazine and do a little guest shot once in a while, do a little writing for him.
Oh, Edward, was it you that called me years ago and told me about Range Magazine?
Yes.
Come on, man. Yeah. You know something? I didn't act right away on that. It took me a while, and then all of a sudden said, I got to get that Range Magazine, and I got it, and I loved it so much that at Christmas time, I bought a bunch of my friends who I always buy gifts for Christmas. I got them subscriptions to Range Magazine, and they thought, what is this magazine? And they said, we never heard of this. And I said, oh, you're going to love this magazine. In fact, this morning, I was reading it before I came over here, the new edition.
Right.
So I just want to thank you, Ed, for turning me on to that, because I didn't have a clue.
Well, you're more than welcome, Lou, and hang in there, bud.
Okay. Thank you for listening. All right, Ed. All right. Well, man, it's been a couple of years since Ed called, and he was trying to educate me and get me up to speed, and he really helped by telling me about Range Magazine. So if you don't subscribe, it is a really high-quality, amazing magazine, and it comes out quarterly. And what a great – they just have great articles, great writers, and so check it out, Range Magazine. And thank you to Ed for – actually, I'm always amazed that they can – hear it up there at Kelly Ridge. I had a guy call me. He's up at Oregon House and has trouble where he is up in Oregon House getting the reception up there. So, but up in Orville and above there, they seem to be able to glom onto this. So, if you don't know about, in fact, I had a cattle rancher call me and left me a couple of messages this week, and she also was commenting about the Bundy article. That was not this current issue of territorialdispatch.biz. You can go on the internet and see that if you're interested. You don't see much about it in the media because the media hates the Bundys. Cliven Bundy and his family, they're Mormons. They farm over there in Clark County, that's Las Vegas area. And the Range Magazine, and you could probably get some articles off their website. They've done a great job talking about that, as well as some other sources. But the Hammonds that Ed was just referring to, it's interesting because if you're a farmer in the Yuba Sutter counties, we all burn. If you're in the farming area, you're burning brush off your trees. And I've farmed some, and I've burnt brush, and I've had a couple times when fires got out of control, and I had to call the fire department, hadn't come put it out, because sometimes in your best efforts, fires can get out of control. The Hammonds, Mr. Hammond and his son, the grown son, they were farming their own property that they had from the federal government, and then there was federal government property, and they had started a controlled burn that lots of people do here with permission from the burn people on certain days that are burn days. And the fire got out of control, and it burned over into some open ground of the federal government, and they actually accused them of an act of terrorism. That's what Ed was referring to. Totally a ripoff. And the judge, they found him guilty, but the judge, I think, felt so bad about it, he gave him a very, very small sentence, like several months in jail. And the government came back in and retried them and gave them more time and to re-sentence. They appealed the sentence, and I think they went back to jail, and they're both, as Ed said, they're in prison. They're in federal prison. Just a total, these guys are just, it's amazing to me when people are out committing crimes against people, ripping them off, carjackings, rape, assault, theft, robbery. And then you have farmers that are going to jail, like Cliven Bundy and his family. They were 700 days, I think, in jail. No bail. When's the last time you saw somebody in jail, no bail? Unbelievable. It just, I just talk about political prisoners. There you have it right there. So, let's see. I wanted to talk about, did you know, you've heard all these situations with different kind of business people being harassed by folks that are, let me back up, and I'm going to put that on pause. And before the break, I was talking about the school system and not protecting our children and not following mandated reporting laws or mandatory reporting laws. And about a year ago, I began talking about an incident that happened with a Stanford University swimmer by the name of Brock Turner. Brock Turner, I believe, was out of Ohio, and he came to Stanford University, probably got a scholarship, but he was a swimmer, and he was at one of the parties that happen on college campuses or around college campuses. I think this was a party sponsored by a fraternity, and they were getting loaded, right? Intoxicated. And a woman and her sister who were not students at the university, and other people are invited to these things, so they went to the party, and the gal got intoxicated, and somehow she passed out, and this guy, Brock Turner, decided to have sex with her and was proceeding to do so when a couple bicyclists drove by. This is outdoors, outside the fraternity, and they saw what he was doing, and they got off their bicycles and pulled him off and contacted law enforcement, and they arrested him. He went to trial, was found guilty. And when Persky sentenced him, Aaron Persky's the judge, a veteran judge in Santa Clara County, he gave him 6 months sentence, and which people threw a fit about, right? We're talking about sexual assault and violence against a woman. And so people reacted to only 6 months sentence, and Stanford law professor Michelle Dauber, Dauber, she began to complain about this, publicly complain, and started a recall campaign. Now, when Scott Turner went to jail, because of the way jail time works nowadays, if you behave yourself in jail in a situation like that, you do for every day you do, you get an extra day off. So he got a 6 month sentence for attempted rape. I don't know whether he actually penetrated the woman or not, but he sexually assaulted an intoxicated, unconscious lady. And so he actually did 90 days in jail for that. He does have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life, no matter where he is. And he's returned to his home state. So this Michelle Dauber started a recall campaign. They needed 58,634 valid signatures to qualify to put a recall on the ballot for this judge. They turned in nearly 95,000 signatures. So I think they got it covered on the 58,000 plus valid signatures. So they are going to have his name on the ballot to vote to recall Judge Aaron Persky. And the way that works is you have a yes or no to recall, and then you have a number of candidates that will run to replace him, and you can vote for them. So it's a all-in-one package. In other words, if they vote and they don't recall him, he stays in office, no competition. If you vote to recall him, then the top vote getter of those that are on the ballot to run in his place would take his spot. So the complaint of the judicial system in California says that recalling a judge could put a chill on judicial independence. It's interesting. Think that through. So if a judge is considered incompetent, biased, I'm not saying this about Persky, but in it, I'm just saying some reasons you might want to get rid of a judge. Incompetent, biased, takes payoffs, immoral. He commits a crime, right? He does something weird. So, again, it's treating the populace like we're idiots. So if you decide that that judge is not worthy of the job, just like you decide a teacher is not morally fit to teach your kids, all of a sudden you're violating the judicial independence or instructional independence of teachers. That's ridiculous. Can people make a mistake and overreact to something? I think we can. But the fact is, if people do not behave themselves in positions of trust and authority, then they should be removed. And if it takes a recall's fine. I think I read this article, but I didn't keep it for this talk today. But after, I don't know whether some of you folks with a few years on you would remember the Rose Bird Supreme Court. Rose Bird is the one that refused to proceed. She stopped the death penalty, even though the people of the state of California wanted the death penalty. Rose Bird stood against the death penalty. So Rose Bird stirred up so many people in California that the chief justices actually have to run for office every once in a while. So at one point, Californians, it wasn't a recall, it was just their turn to come up for election again. I think they voted either 3 or 4 of them off all at the same time, off the Supreme Court of the state of California, rejected them. So I guess that would also put a chill on judicial independence. Independence, sometimes people are too darn independent, right? I don't know. If you had a daughter, I always try to put it, personalize things. It helps me with my judgment. I have to think things through. How would I feel if my daughter went over there and got tanked, did a stupid, and got under the influence? You know, sometimes, people say, "Oh, that kid, he was driving and drinking. It's his own fault he got killed," right? Well, I always personalize it. Like, did I ever do that? And am I glad that didn't happen to me? And so I better not point fingers, right? So I may feel like my daughter did a real stupid going out there and getting loaded and drunk and ended up unconscious, but does that give a person a right to sexually assault her? I don't think so. I don't think people ever have a right, if people are in a position of vulnerability, to take advantage of them. Oh, you left your door open to your house? Then I can come in and steal all your entertainment center, right? Steal your house, rip off your guns because you left the door open, right? You're bad. Right. So anyway, 90 days, do you think you'd be happy if your daughter was raped or assaulted and the guy got off with 90 days? Do you think that I have a youngster at the juvenile hall who's black, and when he comes back to juvenile hall for reoffending, I always ask him what happened. And he always points to his arm. He points to his color as his color. He always points to his race or his ethnicity, as I say, because there's only one human race in my book, not multiple. He always points to his skin color and then kind of smiles at me. And but let me just put it this way. This Scott Turner was a white guy, could have been a world-class swimmer for Stanford. Do you think that a black kid from a single mom household in Yuba City with a public defender would get off with 90 days or a 6-month sentence for sexual assault? Do you think that? I don't think so. I don't let my black friend at juvenile hall, I don't cut him any slack. I lean on him a little bit about his race card antics. But I'm with him on this. I do not think he would get a Scott Turner verdict and sentence being black and being a juvenile hall kid and not being a top-notch U.S. swimmer. I just don't think he'd get the same deal. What do you think? Would you be bummed if your daughter got assaulted and is dealing with that assault and the aftermath of that, trauma of that, and the embarrassment of that, and having your name all over everything when the trial, they mocked her at the trial, kind of, right? Tried to do the slut and nut defense on her. So, and the guy only does 90 days in jail. It's amazing. I just think that wouldn't be good enough for me. That would not be good enough. So, a couple of years ago, it's been longer than a couple of years. Man, life just passes me by. This is really a small little operation out here in eastern Yuba County. We reach out to about 5 counties, but I got a call one day from a public relations person for Breitling Energy Company out of Texas. And I thought, well, what do you want? And they said, our president would like to come on your show. And I thought, that's odd. It's like, why us, right? So I arranged for Chris Faulkner, who is still the president of Breitling Energy out of Texas, their oil and gas operation. And he wanted to come on the show. And at that time, that was when Barack Obama and his energy department secretary, Stephen Chu, supposedly the brightest guy in the administration, was trying to get gas prices up to $9 a gallon so it would force us off the roads and get rid of our fossil fuel cars and buy electric, right? And they were giving money to Solyndra and all these green energy places, and they were going bankrupt. It was a mess, right? And Barack Obama was saying, we're running out of gasoline. We're running out of oil, right? Remember that resource? There's not enough to sustain this country. We got to look for alternatives. That was his argument. And you remember when McCain and Palin ran, and she said, drill, baby, drill. Remember the drill, baby, drill? And he kind of said, hey, even if, because they were saying, Barack Obama, he didn't want to drill on federal lands, and the former governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin, said, we got plenty of oil, just let us drill up there, drill, baby, drill. So he was saying, even if there was even if we said today we'd give out more leases for oil drilling, it'd take a long time to catch up, right? So there's no end in sight. It's kind of like Al Gore saying, or not Al Gore, but Ehrlich, who we talked about, I think, last week, with the population bomb. There's nothing we can do. People by the millions are going to die in the 1970s and 80s. It just, we've overpopulated the earth. It's crazy. It's crazy talk. So anyway, Chris Faulkner came on the show. He called in, I think, from South Africa. He was traveling in Africa. And we had a talk. And he said, remember, the economy was crappy. It took a dive right at the end of the Bush administration. Remember that, the housing bubble? And so Obama inherited this disaster. And so Faulkner made these kind of statements. He said, we can drill our way out of this. He said, there is so much oil. And at that time, and we used to promote it. Is it Williston? Is it Williston, North Dakota, South Dakota? And he say the Bakken oil fields, the Bakken, I think it's Williston, North Dakota, and he said the whole new technology with fracking was being utilized, and so it's a very quick way for us to. It doesn't take a lot of exploration. They already know oil's there. It's a new way to extract it and faster way. So he just said, there's oil coming out. We got oil coming out our ears. And he said, oil and gas, we'll have more oil and gas than we can handle, da-da-da. Well, Chris Faulkner was a prophet, but he actually knew from his own knowledge, from facts. It wasn't like he heard from God. He heard from geologists, right? And Barack Obama, he made Barack Obama sound like an idiot, which he was. He actually didn't know what he's talking about. He just didn't know. He was just repeating stuff. Remember, Barack Obama said, we got all these shovel-ready jobs. It was just a speech. He had no shovel-ready jobs. He said, oh, yeah, we're going to fund all these shovel-ready. There was no shovel-ready jobs ready. So anyway, Chris Faulkner went on to explain how we could have a total revival, economic revival, just based on just one industry. And oil, if they would just get out of the way and let them drill. and let us develop it, and we could quit importing. Remember, they were saying we're totally dependent on all this Saudi Arabia and all these Middle Eastern countries, and it's causing us to be political, industrial disasters and conflicts. And he said we could be done with that. And I'll tell you the rest of the story right after Santos gets done with all this other business he wants to do right now. All right, here we go. All right, welcome back. We're into our last hour, 11 to noon today. This is Lou Benninger, Live with Lou. And Wiki Man played a commercial for Trauma Intervention Program just a minute ago. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we have our Trauma Intervention Training Academy in the Yuba Sutter Counties area. I had someone call me from Nevada County a while back. We don't serve up in Nevada County because we can't get to the call within 20 minutes. So we serve Yuba and Sutter counties at this point. And so if you want to get involved in trauma intervention, you got to be down here in this area of the woods, as they say. So every once in a while, somebody will say, I really wanted to volunteer for trauma intervention program and go out and help police and fire and the hospital and help people in a time of need. And I'll say, okay, great. And they say, well, how do I get involved? And they say, well, you need to go through the academy. Well, when's the academy? And how many do you have a year or something? And I'll say, well, you have once a year. Oh, I can't believe I have to wait 7 months. But, that's the way it works. And so we have a springtime academy, and it starts usually in late February. So this year it starts on February 22nd. And it is conducted over a 2-week period. It's not every day of the week of 2 weeks, but over a 2-week period, about 30 to 40 hours in-class training. And so you can check it out on our website at yubasuttertip.org. And it tells you about TIP. If you've never heard about it, you're new to the community. And it also tells the time and dates. And you can email me off that site if you're interested, or you can just call me at 530-713-1838 or text me. I'm on the air now, so I'm not going to be able to take it live. But you could, the other number that they give on the advertisement for TIP's good too. That comes with the same phone, no big deal. But if you're interested, come to the training, and you can dial me up. I'll talk to you about it and how it all works, how the program works. But we're here. This is our 24th year. We've been here and done over, almost 10,500 911 responses. Didn't cost the taxpayers a nickel. Just think about that. We serve 160,000 people in the Yuba Sutter area, plus visitors passing through. So check that out if you'd like. I want to mention also, there's been a lot of news this week about 2 people leaving the White House. Rob Porter, who was an assistant, a staff member to the president, and kind of an executive assistant. He has been married a couple times, and his wives reported that he was abusive. And then there's now a guy named David Sorensen, who's a speechwriter. Now he's going to leave. It's interesting how we have these different, I'm not justifying misbehavior, but it's interesting how we disqualify people from working if they misbehave. And I understand that working for the White House is a higher calling maybe than working for a business here in Yuba City and Marysville, right? Everybody's looking at you and you're part of the presidential staff. But we're kind of selective on how we go after people. For instance, I don't know whether you can count or name the top 6 or 7 females that Bill Clinton assaulted. One busted her lip, raped one, according to her. But the media's not really interested in that. Remember, he was president, right? He wasn't governor when they went after him, although that some of the assaults were when he was governor. But the issues were when he was president. Remember, he lied. Remember, he went on television, lied with the Lewinsky deal. But he didn't lose his job, right? He didn't quit. He got impeached, but that didn't mean anything in the end. And then I don't know whether you go far enough back to remember when Ted Kennedy, as senator, ran off the bridge and his date for the night drowned. Remember that? He left her there and just kind of went home and called the attorneys to help him. Didn't have any impact on his job. Interesting. So if you're a Democrat and you beat your wife or do something stupid or rape, molest, recently Franken got in trouble and resigned. But it just depends, doesn't it? It's kind of interesting how that works. So Rob Porter, and of course he denies it, but say it's true, even if it's true. It's interesting how certain people lose their jobs, other people don't. And now Kelly, who is the chief of staff of the White House workers, now he's offering to resign, which I think is just absurd. It's like, hey, why didn't the entire staff resign when Clinton was raping people, pillaging and everything? It's interesting how that works. I was talking before the break about how Chris Faulkner, we interviewed Chris, who is the president of Breitling Energy. You can look it up on the internet. It's very easy to find. Big website, Breitling, B-R-E-I-T, Ling, L-I-N-G, Energy, Breitling Energy, out of Texas, very successful firm. And he began to say how geologists told us back during the Obama years that there was so much oil and so much gas, and we now had the technology to pull it out, but the government was standing in the way, and actually he said we could drill our way out of this depression. That's a huge statement. Since energy didn't put us into depression, it was the mismanagement of government that put us into that depression, loaning money to people that could not pay it back for housing. So what's happening today is that U.S., because, and this is all about regulations, removing regulations, not saying it's okay to pollute or be toxic. It's about removing absurd regulations that support agendas that are anti-fossil fuel agendas. And it's fascinating how Democrats are anti-fossil fuel, but they drive SUVs and fly planes. Like some of the biggest green energy people are people that like to fly their own jet around the world instead of taking commercial airlines and even flying business section. They're too important for that, so they have their own jets and just said they have a pilot and a couple other people in the jet and they fly jets all over the place. It's interesting how that works. So if you haven't noticed, U.S. oil and gas companies are kicking the rear out of the international competition, and they're redoing our old assumptions about the global energy market. Now, in the 1970s, when President Carter was, I liked Jimmy Carter, but he just was screwy. And you remember the oil crisis, the gas crisis of 1970s? I was on a trip around the United States with a guy by car. Back then we didn't fly much. And we got caught in San Antonio, Texas, and there was no fuel. We had to sleep in the parking lot of a Denny's. We just slept in the car and waited till the gas station opened. They weren't selling gas at night. So we had to just wait to fuel up. And that was the gas crisis where they supposedly didn't have enough, and it freaked the Carter administration out so much that they forbid oil companies from selling our natural resources to foreign countries and companies. So they couldn't export our oil. Can you imagine whatever product you make or grow? Can you imagine the government? Like I have a friend, Jeff Stevens. He grows walnuts and he ships them. He sells them to China and Turkey. He ships them, right? We ship a lot of farm goods overseas, rice, all kinds of stuff. But can you imagine a government saying we can't sell wheat or rice or corn or this or that or shirts or technology to foreign countries? Well, that's what they did to oil companies. They said, you no longer can sell oil to foreign nations. You can't export it. It's all for us. And they set up a stockpile, what they call a strategic stockpile of oil, because they thought if we ever run out again. In other words, the technology was so lousy in 1970s in Carter's mind, who claimed to be a nuclear scientist type dude, right? He claimed to be all bright and everything. But he gave the impression like one day the spigot's just going to run dry. You're going to turn it on in the morning, and there ain't going to be just a drip, drip, drip come out of it. And we're going to be out of oil, and we're going to have to tap into that strategic supply over there. And so this oil boom was so huge that Saudi Arabians and all these other big oil producers around the world who compete with us have been trying to undercut our efforts in the United States. And they lobby politicians here and try to get them to vote against fossil fuels, right? So they give money to environmentalist groups like the Sierra Club and other groups like Russia, who produces a lot of oil, Saudi Arabia. They give money to those environmental groups to try to shut down oil exploration here, right? Because they want to sell the oil here. They'll haul it in and force us to buy it from them rather than to grow it or produce it ourselves. So, so the oil companies are making money hand over fist, as they say. So various companies like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, Iraq, Nigeria, and they've tried all kinds of things, lowering their prices, raising their prices, ramping up production. But they have lost the war against producers in the United States, and they're going to lose it again because Trump is reducing the regulations and opening up ways and speeding up ways to get leases for oil, what they call oil patches. And so what Chris Faulkner said from Breitling Energy was exactly what's happening. He knew much more than the president. Either the president knew it and was lying, deceiving Americans, or he was just stupid. Either way, it's not so good. At this time, just over the past few years, the U.S. has gained the leading position in the world oil market, regardless of what these other countries that have oil, a lot of oil, do. So it has just shocked leaders, even in America, of this incredible turnaround. You remember we were politicians to say we need to not be dependent on Middle East oil, right? Foreign oil, because they hold us over the barrel, so to speak. So we need to have bird blenders and solar power and all these other things because we can't rely on fossil fuel. Well, the fact is we can rely on fossil fuel, and we're not running out. So this year, it's projected that America will produce more oil than ever. We're going to be putting out 10 million barrels, not a month, not a year, but a day. 10 million barrels a day. The Energy Department, which doesn't produce any energy, they just want to regulate it all, thinks actually we're going to be doing 11 million barrels a day. So that will surpass the Saudis as the second largest oil producer on earth. The Russians still lead the world, and they produce just a hair more at 10.9 million barrels a day. In 2010, in the middle of Barack Obama's tenure, we were producing 5.5 million barrels a day, half. You think about that. No wonder Barack Obama was doing everything he could to shut down the oil industry. He wouldn't allow him to drill on federal lands. He'd allow him to make an application, but through the bureaucracy, you'd never get your lease. So this write-up says if you grew up in the 1970s, which I did, or before, and remember gas lines across America, or if you remember the national flirtation with burning corn. Remember burning corn? Ethanol? Stupid idea. It's totally anti-environmentalism. Causes food prices to go up because corn feeds animals. So they've mandated that you use a certain amount of ethanol. They subsidized farmers for growing it with tax dollars. But Bush administration introduced that. Bush got caught up in the whole global warming baloney. And you were conditioned back then to worry about war in the Middle East because it would affect us at the pump. If there's problems in the Middle East, the price of gas would go up, right? So the new reality today is that America is one of the leaders in the oil market. And since Trump has been in there, we've lifted the 40-year ban on oil exports. Tankers filled with U.S. crude have landed in more than 30 countries since they stopped that. Think that's helping business? And we're sending it to massive economies like China and India, and all over the place. Where just a couple of years ago, for the last 40 years, we could not sell any oil to these foreign countries. It's absurd. No wonder businesses are growing. U.S. producers now export between 1.5 million and 2 million barrels of crude oil a day, which could rise by 2022 to 4 million. My hunch is by 2022, long ways away, we'll have a lot more than that being exported. So pretty cool changes. And all told, prophesied, predicted. This is the way this is described is a story that transcends politics. Though the Trump administration has done its best to deregulate the industry and open up federal lands and waters to more drilling, it's really about innovative and successful exploration and development of techniques here that have outperformed foreign countries. It goes back to the Trump thing of make America great again, that Americans have a lot of good ideas if they're allowed to utilize them. Let's see. We got a couple of minutes left, 3 minutes left. I wanted to mention that I was getting used to any time there was it just seems like bakers were under attack, bakeries, right? Bakers were under attack by the lesbian gay movement. And if a couple homosexuals wanted to go in and buy a cake for a wedding and the baker didn't want to do it, instead of going to another bakery and doing their business there, they wouldn't take no for an answer, and they'd say, you have to do what we ask you to do. We have to, whatever we want to do, you have to do because we're homosexual. And so bakery after bakery is being taken to court and costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to fight this. But I was shocked to read that in Bakersfield, a place called Tastries Bakery, Tastries with a T, run by a lady named Kathy Miller. She said because of her Christian beliefs, she would not make a wedding cake for the homosexual couple. And this happens so often, she recommended another bakery that wouldn't have a problem with it and recommended that they make it. But they said, no, you have to make it because we want you to make it. So it's like the government saying, it's your business, but you have to pay the wages that we state. We have a minimum wage, and you can't hire anybody, even if they don't have any arms and legs, for any cheaper than what we want to In other words, we're going to run part of your business. So anyway, a judge who worked at one time for a law firm that protected business from frivolous lawsuits has rejected the Democrat Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, who's just another homeboy, little Nazi running around down there in Sacramento. He took this case on behalf of this couple, but the judge rejected Xavier Becerra's argument of forcing this Christian baker to betray his faith and participate in a homosexual marriage. So he said, basically the judge says they don't have to do it. So there you have it, Mr. Becerra. So there's another fight going on with what they call the Masterpiece Cake Shop. That's a guy named Jack. And he's got the same thing going on in Colorado. The Civil Rights Commission there's taking him on, and he's at the Supreme Court right now dealing with that. But it's the same exact thing. But you'll find that it has nothing to do with, there's lots of bakers. You ever been to a place, you go into a restaurant, because I eat at a restaurant sometimes, too busy to fuss around, and I go to a restaurant, and it's too busy. So I could go in and demand that they put me to the front of the line because I'm a this, I'm a that. But I just go to the next restaurant, right, and find an empty spot. I don't force my way into something. But it's interesting how these people are forcing their way and saying, you're going to do what I tell you to do, or. So we're going to be right back. We're going to take a break, and we'll finish up with one more half hour. All right. Well, we caught up with a couple clips that we missed earlier, which I'm glad we did because I think they're helpful to hear. I wanted to mention before we get done here today that John Cox, the Republican candidate for governor, is going to be in town on the 19th. That's a Monday night, 6:30, at the Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots meeting. So check that out. They meet on the 1st and 3rd. That's the 3rd Monday, and 1179 Eagle Road, Yuba City. Very easy to get to, well lighted, lots of parking, easy out at the Church of Glad Tidings campus. Building 200, it's the first building on the left as you drive in. You can get there at 6, doors open. You don't need to be a member. You don't need to join. Just come. It's just a public service of the Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots, so check it out. And also, I just want to give another shout out to Universal Security, Elite Universal Security. And if you have a need for needing some help, so people watch over your business or your property or your house, or just check things out, or you just need to solve a problem regarding security or people harassing your business, call Monty Hecker over at 749-0280. Or if you want to work for them, you could check it out at eliteuniversalsecurity.com. Or if you want to get involved in learning how to get into the security business, be a guard, they got all kinds of classes that are offered at various times. API Academy at api-academy.com. All kinds of classes and schooling. Get your concealed weapon permit, handcuff training, taser, de-escalation, pepper spray, all kinds of training. If you, they'll help you even if you have difficulty financing further classes. Maybe short of money. They may have some ideas for you where you can get financing to take their courses to get a job. So check that out. Well, I don't know whether you follow this, but when we vote in June, which is just a couple months away, right? Primary. And then we have the general election in November. And so you have candidates to vote for, but then you have these things called measures or propositions or referendums that have numbers and letters. Sometimes they're local propositions or measures. Sometimes they're state. And so some of them are called bonds. And some of you may not catch this, but they usually have really good subtitles besides being called a bond. They'll say Children's Hospital, Fund to Children's Hospital, Water Bond, fight some disease, something, health issues, whatever. The key thing about bonds, it's like government starts off with no money, right? And then they tax people, their citizens, to take their money from them, forcibly take it. If you don't pay it, they will put a lien on your property or put you in jail, ultimately. So they take your money and then they say, we need this to run the government. But then when they run out of that money, they decide to spend it in a certain way. They don't ask your opinion. They just spend it. So then when they don't spend it for the things that you think they should spend it on, for instance, road taxes on your gasoline, they do not spend it on roads. You think that's odd, don't you? Well, I do too. So they don't do that. Then they turn around and say, now we're going to pass a special tax for roads in addition to the fuel tax and the DMV fees and all those things. Now we're going to, because we use that money elsewhere, we're going to now have another road tax. That's what we just paid, that additional 12 cents a gallon. So the same thing happens with water. They'll say, we're going to have a water bond. Now, when you go through all this drought, like, for instance, Jerry Brown's father, Pat Brown, back in the 50s and 60s, started the California Water Project and built a series of dams up and down California, because if you didn't have any dams, this state is really kind of a desert climate. It rains in the winter and then it flows out to the, if you can't capture the water, it's like operating without a savings account, right? You just spend all your money every month. You'd never have money for the hard times. And so the idea is those dams are like savings accounts. And when it's hard times, then you draw down the account, right? Because once the water's gone into the ocean, it's gone forever, right? It's like an hour of the day. Once it's gone forever. You can't bank it. But if you have a dam, you can bank the water. And so once Pat Brown died, Jerry Brown's dad, and then Jerry Brown came along in the 1970s as governor, he did a lot of crazy things. He decided that he didn't like the California Water Project, and it didn't continue to build on it. In other words, the water project really never got finished. There were other dams in line to be built, but environmentalism took over, and they said, we're really destroying the state by conserving water. But what they didn't do, they should have put a fence around the state and say no more people allowed. But they didn't. The state continued to grow, doubled in size, population-wise. Same amount of water storage. So, and that water storage helped for farming, to replenish groundwater for cities to draw off for drinking water, and also for flood control. And so you see now every once in a while, because Californians are afraid, a lot of times we vote out of fear. We have a flood. We think, oh, my God, we need a dam, so we built Bullards Bar Dam. Oh, my God, we need a dam, so we built Oroville Dam. and so a lot of times we vote out of fear, right? So we just had this terrible spillway incident up at Oroville that cost us all money. All of us at 180,000, 200,000 people had to evacuate. People are now suing the government because of their mismanagement and want some of that money back. Some of these farmers lost a lot of money, lost their land. So all of us lost money on that when we had to evacuate, because you had to live in hotels, you had to buy, it costs money. So you're fearful. Is that dam going to fail again? Well, you weren't thinking about it for decades. And so when we go through a drought and they put you on water rationing, and you can't water your car, you can't water your property, you can't wash your car, you can't do this, you can't do that. They raised the rates on the water, like in Marysville. It was ridiculous. So then when you have Then when they put a water bond on the ballot, a bond means that you're giving the government permission to go out and borrow money that you are going to pay back if you stay in California. That some of your tax dollars are going to go to pay back the interest on the bond. That's what a bond is. And so they put these water bonds, and they say they mention a lot of things we're going to do with it. Parks, we're going to help the ecology, do all this stuff, and then we're going to do some water storage. So you focus on the water storage because you think we need more water storage to stop floods and because we don't want to shut down farms, right? Ruin entire thousands of acres of farms on the west side of the Central Valley because there's some judge says they can't have water anymore over there. So a few years ago, we passed a water bond. I mean, a number of years ago. Then 4 years ago, we passed another water bond. They say the same thing over and over again, and they add $5.5 billion. Now, in 4 years ago, it was $7.5 billion, and they had water storage in there. Do you think we've got any water? Do you think they broke ground on a dam yet? You think, oh, well, it takes a lot of time. You know why it takes a lot of time? Because of all the stupid regulations and bureaucracy. Have you heard President Trump say that they built from start to finish, or all the bureaucracy to moving into the Empire State Building, less than 1 year? Think about that now. In the center of New York, not out in the boondocks where easy access, center of New York. You think that's harder than building a dam? You're kidding me, right? You think it's dams harder than building the Empire State Building? I don't know. To me, it's simple. Dams are a lot simpler to build than all the technology and all the infrastructure involved in a building. Skyscraper, you got to go down multi-floors into the ground. So what you have now is 4 years later, we have not done jack diddly with that $7.5 million except pay it back. Now we're paying the millions and millions of dollars. Now we have an article in the Appeal Democrat where the Yuba County Water Agency, which is the Board of Supervisors plus two other people, has given an endorsement to two more water bonds coming up. One's in June, and then another one's going to be in November. One's been put on by the legislature in June, and then there's another one being put on in November. So the one in June is $4 billion, and then there's another one, $8 to $9 billion. And they haven't even spent the other money. But Brent Hasty is writing this op-ed in the Appeal Democrat and says, our agency is asking you to vote for this. Now, Brent Hasty and his guys over there, a lot of those guys claim they're Republicans. Actually, they're undocumented Democrats. They act like Democrats. In fact, Brent Hasty voted for one of the most incredibly expensive bond letting out of bonds for Yuba College in the history of the college. And when Chancellor Houston came in, he panicked because of the egregious amount of millions and millions and millions of dollars of interest we're going to have to pay on the bonds those guys passed. Very high interest rates. And since then, they've been trying to clean that up. That's Brent Hasty. And now they're wanting us to authorize another $13 billion in more water projects. And they haven't even got jack done on any other. We don't have any more water resources than we had 2 water bonds ago. Not any. Not one dam built. There hadn't been a dam built in 40, 50 years. Do you know that? And we've doubled our population. Every time you vote for a bond, if you complain about the roads on I-80, I just drove down there to fly to Vietnam. It's horrible. The roads are horrible. There's roads in Marysville that if you if you were walking across the street, if you stepped in the crack, you'd break your ankle. They're that big. Your entire foot can fit in some of those chunks that are missing in the streets. When you borrow money in your personal budget and you pay back interest, that money buys you nothing but your unwillingness to plan and your unwillingness to wait till you have the cash to do the work. That's just the way it is. A lot of these guys that want to do bonds, borrow, they don't do that in their own life. Maybe Hasty does. In fact, when I wrote a letter to the editor, long before I wrote for the Territorial Dispatch, I wrote a letter to the editor complaining about the incredible, wasteful spending of the Board of Trustees of Yuba College. And he threw a fit and complained about my spiritual beliefs, my Christianity or something like that. I thought, you're nuts. You're like nutso. It's like, hey, that's our money. That's not your money. It's our money. And it's a horrible decision to build that Sutter County campus out there on Highway 99. It's a nice place. I've been in it. It's nice. Cool. But to indebt the consumers for 30 years, spending hundreds of millions of dollars in interest, ridiculous. And thankfully, Houston, when he came in, he said, hey, we need to figure out how to fix this. And they've worked on refinancing to cut those interest rates down. But it was a stupid move. And now, so I called the public relations guys who sent out this public news release to the different papers, and I called Alex over there at Yuba County Water Agency. I said, hey, what, did you guys vote on this? Was this unanimous? Are you sure all 7 guys agreed to this? This happens to be all 7 guys over there, right? There's no ladies. He said, yep, unanimous. That's what he wrote me back. And I said, did you guys do any analysis of how the other billions of dollars that we voted to borrow is being used? You're happy with how that money's being handled? He said, well, I have to get back to you on that. I can't answer that question. So my suggestion to you is, if you are not going to research this, is to vote no on the water bonds in June and November. But if you have time, do your own research. And do your own research on what's happening with the Prop 1 bond. And I don't even know, I can't even remember. I'm going to look it up because I'm going to write an article about it. On the previous bond to Prop 1, they keep asking for money for the same type of categories: groundwater replacement, reforestation, repairing a canal, doing this, doing that, doing the other thing. And there's no more water storage. So when we get big rains here, like obviously this year, we haven't got any rain, right? Hardly any. The redneck rain gauge just sits in the center of our hallway. It's dry every day I come in here. Dry. And it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money for us to give that report. It's just a green garbage can under a hole in the ceiling. We don't have to hire a meteorologist or anything. But when it does rain, you'd think we should have more places to catch the rain and hold on to it. Like they say, my friends in Southern California say, when we turn on the shower before it gets warm, we catch the water in a 5-gallon bucket, so we use it outside. And I thought, it's too bad that Jerry Brown doesn't use that philosophy with the state. When it's raining, why don't we catch the rain, hold on to it for a while, and then use it discerningly around the state? But state legislators don't get that. They say, be very careful, reuse your water, be careful, turn it off when you don't leave the water run, do this, do that, take a Navy shower, as they say. I thought, why don't you guys use some of these techniques on the state? Why don't we build another dam? This rancher called me the other day she's a cattle rancher, and she said, I wonder about this Sites Reservoir. I didn't realize they have to that reservoir will not. Did you realize that reservoir, Sites Reservoir over in the valley, that won't fill up on its own? You have to pump water into it. Does that sound stupid to you? All the utilities to pump water into a holding area, a pond, you have to pump water in and then pump water out. That sounds stupid to me. I think we ought to build the Marysville Dam, which the Marysville Dam was going to be built up by Park-Spar Bridge. At one time, there was an idea for that. But to me, that makes a lot more sense. But here we are 4 years later. I mean, how many years before we actually decide we're going to do the blueprints on a dam? They're still discussing. And here's the other real deceptive thing. With this Prop 1, you have to prove that there's a return on the dollar to the taxpayer. And if there's not enough return on the dollar, let me just think about this. Did they have that spillway they just repaired is costing? It's going to cost $1 billion before we're done, and nobody has figured out how much that costs us to evacuate 200,000 people and the loss of business. We're talking about billions of dollars. I figured it out with just some simple numbers one day of all the families that had to move all their people and hotel rooms and eating out and loss of job, loss of wages. And so flood protection is to prevent the loss of a lot of assets and also energize and water all these acres that farmers. Some of the best farmland in the world is in our valleys: Sacramento Valley, Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley. But it can't grow without water. And I don't know whether you've driven down I-5. I haven't in a number of years, but I know the orchards that were just so beautiful when I used to drive to Mexico. We used to do a project in Tijuana. And we used to look at these beautiful orchards and all the water, and it was just beautiful. And now they're all gone. And they're fallow because the judge cut off the water because the Delta smelt was struggling, not having enough water down there. Right now, we're spending enough money, we could get an aquarium for each one of those smelt. Just keep them in its own little puddle of water. Are we out of time? Shoot, we're out of time. So anyway, vote against the water bonds. Brent Hasty's full of baloney. And all right, Ed, thanks for calling in. Keep listening up there and on the top. I bet he can even see down into Oroville, Lake Oroville. So God bless. If you run into somebody this week, treat him nice because it may be an angel and you don't even know it. All right, catch you next week.